The salt-laced wind howled around the corners of the salty page, rattling the old leaded glass windows in their frame. Leo traced the spine of a worn copy of Moby Dick, his movements a familiar ritual after a decade of closing up his bookstore. The small town of Port Blossom, Oregon, had already surrendered to the approaching storm, the streets empty and slick with rain. The only light coming from the warm, honeyed glow of the scent of old paper, leather, and brewing tea filled the air, a perfume he'd come to associate with home. He glanced at the ship's clock on the wall, its gentle ticking a counterpoint to the gale outside. 7:05 p.m., 5 minutes past closing. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you are watching from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. He was about to turn the antique sign in the window from open to close when the brass bell above the door chimed, a frantic little sound against the storm's deep bass. A woman stood there, silhouetted against the tumultuous gray evening, a small boy half hidden behind her. She was trying to wrestle a collapsed umbrella that had clearly lost its battle with the wind. Her dark hair whipped across her face, but it was her eyes that caught him, even in the dim light. They were sharp, intelligent, and utterly exhausted, like distant stars on the verge of burning out. "I'm so sorry," Leo said, his voice calm and steady. A lighthouse, in the storm of her arrival, were actually closed. The woman finally abandoned the mangled umbrella outside the door, stepping fully inside and pulling the boy with her. She was dressed in a way that didn't belong in Port Blossom, a tailored dark coat that spoke of cities and boardrooms, not bluffs and tide pools. The boy was a miniature version of her, with the same dark hair and serious eyes. "I know," she said, her voice crisp but frayed at the edges. "I saw the sign. We just got into town. Our rental cabin is somewhere up the coast and the GPS died. I saw the lights and I just thought." She trailed off, looking around a bookstore as if seeing a ghost. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, the rolling cozy reading nooks with their overstuffed armchairs. It was a world away from the digital chaos she'd just escaped. "I haven't seen a place like this since I was a child." Leo looked from her tired face to the boy, who was staring with wide eyes at a display of model ships on a high Something in her posture, a kind of weary defensiveness, resonated with him. He remembered the first few years after his wife left, the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to be everything for his daughter, Maya. "Well," he said, moving away from the door and toward the small electric kettle he kept behind the counter. "The storm's not letting up anytime soon. I can't make you go back out in that." "I was just about to make some tea." The relief that washed over the woman's face was palpable. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," he said simply. "Find a place to get dry." "What's your name?" "Eris," she said, as if the name itself was an effort. "Dr. Thorne, and this is my son, Finn." "Leo, welcome to the Salty Page." Eris found a worn leather armchair near the maritime history section, and Finn, after a moment's hesitation, sat on the floor beside her, pulling a tablet from his small backpack, plunging them into a sudden, profound darkness. The only light was the cold blue glow from Finn's tablet. "Oh, wonderful," Eris muttered, a note of near hysterical laughter in her voice. "Don't worry," Leo's voice came calmly from the darkness. "Happens all the time out here. Part of the coastal charm." A moment later, a match scraped and a warm, flickering glow bloomed from the counter. He was lighting a series of old oil lanterns, their soft light casting long, dancing shadows across the thousands of spines. The bookstore was transformed, becoming something ancient and magic. "Wow," Finn whispered, his tablet forgotten. Eris stared, captivated. The storm raging outside seemed to fade away, replaced by the intimate golden bubble of the lantern-lit shop. It felt like stepping back in time. "This is incredible," she said, when Leo approached with 2 steaming mugs of tea and a smaller one of hot chocolate. It has its moments, he agreed, setting the drinks down on a small table made from a ship's hat. Born and raised here, you learn to appreciate the slower pace. Slower pace, Iris repeated, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I'm not sure I remember what that is. She worked at a major university in Seattle, leading a team of researchers charting the outer edges of the universe. Her life was a series of deadlines, grant proposals, and terabytes of data. This trip was a university-mandated sabbatical to prevent a complete burnout, a fact she resented with every fiber of her being. "What brings you to Port Blossom?" Leo asked, then held up a hand. "Sorry. You don't have to answer that. It's just you don't exactly look like you're here for the annual Saltwater Taffy Festival." Eris managed a small smile. "Forced relaxation. My department head thinks I'm about to spontaneously combust from stress." The question was direct but gentle. "Probably," she admitted. "But it's a productive stress. We're on the verge of a major discovery, mapping dark matter filaments between galactic superclusters." The words felt alien in this cozy analog space. Leo just nodded, as if she'd said she was a baker or a fisherman. "Sounds important." "It is," she said, a hint of her usual professional defensiveness creeping in. "But it doesn't leave much time for this," gestured around the quiet, warm room. Finn had wandered over to a low shelf and was pulling out a large, heavy book. "What's this one?" he asked, his voice quiet but curious. Leo's expression softened. "That's a special one. Be careful with it." Went over and helped Finn carry the book to the floor near a lantern. It was an old, leather-bound star atlas, its pages thick and yellowed with age. "It was my grandfather's," Leo explained, opening it carefully. "He was a sailor. Taught me all the constellations from this book." Iris felt a strange pull. She studied distant galaxies, phenomena so vast and remote they were barely comprehensible. Yet here was a book that charted the same sky with hand-drawn art and ancient myth. "Look," Finn said, pointing to a drawing of a hunter with a bow. "Orion. You know Orion?" Leo asked, surprised. "Of course," Eris answered for him. "Finn can name every star in the belt. Alnitak, Alnilam, Mintak." Finn looked up, a rare spark of pride in his eyes. He was usually shy about his knowledge, which other kids found strange. "Betelgeuse is a red supergiant," he offered, "and Rigel is a blue supergiant." "That's amazing," Leo said with genuine admiration, and Eris watched as her son, who had barely spoken a word since they left Seattle, began to engage. "My daughter loves the stories behind them," Leo said, turning a page to show a depiction of Cassiopeia. "She's 8. Her name's Maya." Just then, a small figure with a bright yellow raincoat and tangled blonde hair burst through the shop's back door, which led to their small apartment upstairs. "Dad, the power's out. Can we tell ghost stories?" Maya stopped short when she saw Eris and Finn, her eyes wide. "We have company." "We do," Leo said, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Maya, this is Dr. Thorne, or Eris, and this is her son, Finn. They got caught in the storm." Maya's gaze immediately fell on the star atlas spread on the floor. "You're looking at Grandpa's book," she exclaimed, dropping her raincoat and scrambling over. "Do you know the story of Andromeda?" Finn shook his head, looking a little overwhelmed by her sudden energy. "She was a princess who got chained to a rock to be eaten by a sea monster," Maya announced dramatically, "and Perseus saved her." Eris watched, mesmerized as this little girl, a whirlwind of stories and imagination, began to draw her quiet, fact-based son out of his shell. Maya didn't care about the spectral classification of stars. She cared about the heroes and monsters who lived among them. Leo caught Eris's eye and smiled. "She's a force of nature. She's wonderful," Eris said, and the admission felt like a crack in the armor she'd worn for years. They sat there for another hour, the storm raging outside while inside, by the light of lanterns, the two children created a new universe on the floor. A blend of science and myth. Finn would point out a star cluster, and Maya would invent a story about it. First time in what felt like a lifetime. Eris wasn't thinking about data sets or funding reports. She was just there, in a warm, quiet room, listening to her son laugh. "I should probably try to find that cabin," she said eventually, as the storm's fury began to subside into a steady, drumming rain. "The power might be out there too," Leo said. "There's a small inn just down the street, the Anchor. I can call the owner, see if he has a room. The lines are probably still working." He disappeared behind the counter, and Eris could hear his low, reassuring voice on the phone. She felt a pang of disappointment that surprised her with its intensity. She didn't want to leave. When Leo returned, he had a set of keys in his hand. "George said to just take these. His generator is running, and he left the corner room unlocked for you. Said you can settle up in the morning." "Thank you," Eris said, feeling an uncharacteristic lump in her throat. "For everything, the tea, the lanterns, the kindness. It's what people do here," he said with a shrug. As they gathered their things, Finn hesitated, looking at the star atlas. "He'd come back tomorrow?" he asked, looking at his mother. "To see the book again?" "And me," Maya added. "Of course," Leo answered before Eris could. "The shop opens at 10. We'll be here." Outside, the air was cold and clean, smelling of rain and pine and the sea. As Leo held a large umbrella over them for the short walk to the inn, Iris found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her. A steady, calm warmth in the dark. That night, lying in a comfortable bed in a quiet room, with the sound of the ocean replacing the city's hum, Iris couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the bookstore, the lanterns, and the man who seemed so content in his small, quiet world. She thought about the look on Finn's face as he talked about the stars with someone who was actually listening. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something that wasn't ambition or stress. It felt like hope. And as she drifted off to sleep, she was already looking forward to 10 o'clock the next morning. True to their word, Iris and Finn were waiting outside the salty page when Leo arrived to open. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling under a pale sun. Finn was practically vibrating with an energy Eris hadn't seen in him for years. Maya was already inside, setting up a drawing station at a low table in the children's section. Kids greeted each other like old friends, immediately engrossed in a project that involved drawing their own constellations on large sheets of paper. Iris found herself gravitating toward the science section, a collection that was more history of science than modern theory. "Find anything interesting?" Leo asked, coming up beside her with 2 mugs of coffee. He was wearing a comfortable-looking flannel shirt, and the morning light caught the flecks of gray in his beard. "Just surprised you have a first edition of Carl Sagan's Cosmos," she said, touching the book's spine reverently. "It was a gift from a customer. Said it changed his life, and he wanted it to have a good home." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. "Thank you for yesterday," Eris said. "You have no idea how much we needed that." "It was my pleasure. It's not often I get a world-renowned astrophysicist and her brilliant son stopping by." Eris blushed slightly. "You Googled me. Had to make sure you weren't an axe murderer who lured unsuspecting booksellers in with tales of dark matter," he said with a grin. "And what was the verdict? The jury's still out on the axe murderer part, but your work is incredible. I spent an hour last night reading about your research. I didn't understand most of it, but it sounds like you're trying to read the universe's oldest secrets. My story is pretty simple. Grew up here, tried the city for a couple of years after college, hated it. Came home, and when old Mr. Abernathy decided to retire, I bought this place. It's not mapping galaxies, but It has its own kind of magic. He gestured around the store. These books are full of different universes. I just get to be the keeper. Over the next few days, the bookstore became their anchor. Iris would try to work on her laptop in a corner, but she'd inevitably get drawn into a conversation with Leo, or find herself watching Finn and Maya build elaborate forts out of encyclopedias. Leo showed them his town, not the tourist trap, but the real Port Blossom. They explored the tide pools at low tide, where Leo, who'd minored in marine biology, pointed out sea stars and anemones, explaining their life cycles with a storyteller's flair that captivated both children. He took them on a hike through the coastal forest to a hidden cove where seals sunned themselves on the rock. During these walks, their conversations deepened. Iris found herself telling him about the immense pressure of her job, the constant competition for funding, the feeling that she was always failing as a mother because her mind was a million light years away. I feel like I'm showing Finn the world through a textbook instead of actually letting him live in it, she confessed, as they watched the kids search for agates on the beach. You're here now, Leo said gently. That's what matters. In turn, Leo told her about his wife, who had loved him but couldn't stand the quiet predictability of small-town life. He talked about his initial fear of raising Maya alone and how the community in Port Blossom had wrapped its arms around them both. I used to think my world was too small, he admitted, watching Maya help Finn climb a large piece of driftwood. Then I realized it's not the size of your world that matters. It's how much you explore the world you have. Iris felt that statement land with a quiet, profound weight. She had the entire universe at her fingertips, but she'd forgotten how to explore the small, beautiful world right in front of her. She was seeing it now through Leo's eyes, and it was breathtaking. The day before she and Finn were due to leave, the four of them had a bonfire on the beach as the sun set, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. They roasted marshmallows, and Maya told a story about a friendly whale who carried lost sailors home. Finn, for his part, explained the science of how stars were born from nebulae, his voice confident and clear. Iris and Leo sat side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, the warmth from the fire a pale imitation of the warmth that was growing between them. I don't want to go back, Iris said quietly, the confession hanging in the twilight air. Said, then don't. It's not that simple. My work, my entire life is in Seattle. Is it a life you want to go back to? He asked, his gaze steady. She didn't have an answer. The thought of returning to her sterile apartment, her demanding schedule, the crushing loneliness she hadn't even fully acknowledged until now, felt like stepping back into a cage. The goodbye the next morning was fraught with a tension none of them knew how to handle. Finn and Maya exchanged solemnly drawn pictures of constellations, promising to become science and story pen pals. Iris stood by her car, the engine humming, a stark reminder of the world that was waiting for her. Thank you, Leo, she said, her voice thick with unspoken emotions, for showing us your world. It can be your world too, anytime you want, he replied, his hands tucked into his pocket. He wanted to tell her to stay, to ask her what this was between them, but the words wouldn't come. It was too soon, too complicated. As she drove away, Finn was quiet in the passenger seat. Iris glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Leo and Maya standing in front of the bookstore until the car rounded a bend and they were gone. Mom said after a few minutes of silence, Leo's world is nicer than ours. Iris felt a tear slide down her cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. Yeah, buddy, he whispered. I know. Back in Seattle, the city felt louder, harsher, more demanding than ever. Iris's apartment, which she'd always seen as a sleek, minimalist sanctuary, now felt cold and empty. Her work, which had been her entire focus, now seemed like a collection of abstract problems compared to the tangible reality of finding a perfect sea star in a tide pool. She tried to dive back into her research. She and Leo began to talk on the phone every night. Their conversations would start with updates about the kids. Maya had won a prize for her drawing of a space whale. Finn had aced his physics test, would soon drift into more personal territory. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their day, their dreams, their frustration. It became the part of her day she looked forward to the most. One evening, about 2 weeks after she'd left, a package arrived from Port Blossom. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the old, leather-bound star atlas. A note from Leo was tucked inside the cover. It read, "Thought you might need this. The sky is the same in Seattle, but the stories help." She held a heavy book in her hands and cried, not from sadness, from a profound and aching sense of connection to this man who understood her in a way no one ever had. He hadn't just given her a book, he'd given her a bridge between their two worlds. It was Eris who suggested the next visit. "You've seen my vacation self," she said during one of their late-night calls. "Now you should see the real me, the stressed-out, over-caffeinated scientist in her natural habitat." Leo laughed. "I'm not scared." So, one crisp autumn weekend, Leo and Maya drove the 3 hours up to Seattle. Stepping onto Eris's university campus was like entering another country. The buildings were sleek structures of glass and steel. Students bustled by with an air of frantic importance, and the air crackled with intellectual energy. Eris met them outside the physics building, and Leo felt a jolt seeing her there. She was wearing a lab coat over a sharp blazer. Her hair was pulled back efficiently, and she held a tablet like it was a part of her body. This was Dr. Thorne, the formidable scientist, and he was momentarily intimidated. But then she smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes, and she was just Eris again. "Welcome to my world," she said. She gave them a tour of her lab, a place of whirring supercomputers and screens filled with complex equations. Finn's eyes were wide with awe. Maya, though less impressed with the computers, was fascinated by a large three-dimensional model of a galaxy cluster, declaring it looked like cosmic glitter. While the kids explored with Eris's graduate assistant, Eris took Leo to the university's observatory, a massive dome on the roof of the building. As the huge telescope whirred and positioned itself, Eris's entire demeanor changed. Her exhaustion fell away, replaced by a passionate, infectious excitement. Spoke about stellar nurseries and galactic collisions, her voice full of wonder. "This is what you love," Leo said, watching her. "It's not just a job for you. It's my way of trying to understand where we came from," she said, looking at him. "But I'm starting to realize that understanding the why is just as important as the how. You and Maya, you're teaching me that." That evening, they went out for dinner, their first real day. They found a quiet Italian restaurant with the kids happily occupied with coloring menus. They finally had a chance to talk. "So," Leo said, taking a sip of wine, "what do we do about this?" Eris met his gaze directly. "I don't know. My life is here. Your life is there, and there are two kids who are becoming best friends and don't understand why 3 hours feels like a million miles." "I could never ask you to give up your work," he said. "It's part of who you are, and I can't leave Port Blossom, the bookstore, Maya's life. It's all rooted there." "I know," she said, her expression troubled. "So we're at an impasse." "Maybe not," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Maybe we just haven't found the right map yet." Their hands stayed linked for the rest of the meal. It wasn't a solution, but it was a promise to keep looking for a way to navigate the distance between their worlds. The rest of the weekend was a blur of parks, museums, and laughter. They watched Maya teach Finn how to skip stones at Green Lake, and Finn explained the principles of aerodynamics to Maya as they flew a kite at Gasworks Park. Seeing the four of them together felt so natural, so right, that the thought of separating again was a physical ache. Leo and Maya left on Sunday evening. The goodbye was even harder than the first time. They all knew what was at stake now. This wasn't just a vacation friendship anymore. It was something real and fragile that was being stretched to its breaking point by logistics and life choice. As Leo drove south, Maya was quiet for a long time. "Dad," she said finally, "why can't Eris and Finn just live with us? Our house is big enough." "Complicated, sweetie," he said, his heart aching. "Eris has a very important job that she can only do in the city, but she's not as happy there," Maya said with the simple, devastating wisdom of a child. You can see it in her eye. And Leo knew she was right. Back in her silent apartment, Eris felt a profound sense of loss. The weekend had only highlighted the stark contrast between the life she had and the life she was beginning to realize she wanted. The following week, the universe, in its infinite and ironic wisdom, decided to present her with a choice. The head of her department called her into his office. "Eris," he said, his face beaming, "I have the opportunity of a lifetime for you. You're our top candidate to lead the new Hyperion Array project." It was the most advanced radio telescope project in the world. It was a dream job, the culmination of everything she had ever worked for. There was only one catch. The primary research facility is in the Atacama Desert, her boss said, in Chile. The position would require you to relocate for a minimum of 5 years. 5 years. In Chile, it was a continent away from Seattle and a universe away from a small bookstore on the Oregon coast. Her boss saw it as a crowning achievement. Eris saw it as an impossible choice. She spent the next few days in a daze. Her ambition, the driving force of her entire adult life, was screaming at her to say yes. This was her legacy, her chance to make a permanent mark on her field. But her heart, a part of herself she had long ignored, was screaming even louder. It showed her images of lantern light, bonfires on the beach, and the easy, comfortable way Leo's hand fit in hers. It showed her Finn's open, happy face as he drew made-up constellations with Maya. One night, unable to sleep, sat in her living room, the old star atlas open on her lap. She thought about the ancient sailors who had used these maps to navigate vast, unknown oceans. They had followed the stars, but they were always trying to get somewhere, to home, to a connection, to a safe harbor. She was following the stars too, but where was she trying to go? She finally called Leo. Her voice laid it all out for him: the job, Chile, the 5 years, the incredible opportunity, the impossible decision. She expected him to be disappointed, to be sad. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. "Wow, Eris," he said finally, his voice soft. That's amazing, recognizing how brilliant you are. You're not upset?" "Of course, a part of me is. The selfish part that wants you to be a 3-hour drive away, not a 15-hour flight. But the part of me that loves you just wants you to be happy. This is your dream. I would never stand in the way of that." And in his selfless, unwavering support, he gave her the clarity she needed. The choice wasn't about her career versus him. It was about what kind of life she truly wanted to lead. Did she want a life defined by distant galaxies? One defined by the people she held close? She realized with a sudden, startling certainty that it was possible, maybe, to have both. Not in Chile. "Leo," she said, her voice clear and strong now, "what if there's another way? What if I don't have to choose between the stars and a safe harbor? What if my safe harbor is where the stars?" The next morning, Eris walked into her department head's office. She respectfully declined the position in Chile. Her boss was stunned, arguing that she was throwing away her career. "No," Eris said, a calm smile on her face. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm just recharting my course." She then presented him with a counter-proposal, a project she had been quietly developing in the back of her mind. "There's a smaller, underutilized observatory in the Oregon Coast Range, she explained, pulling up a file on her tablet. It's affiliated with the university, but mostly used for undergraduate study. The atmospheric conditions are excellent. I want to propose a new research initiative based there, a long-term study on stellar evolution in our local galactic neighborhood, smaller in scale than the Chile project, but it's fundamental, important work, and I can lead it remotely with a small team on site. The boss was skeptical, but Eris was relentless. She had data, projections, a budget. She had a passion he hadn't seen in her for years. It wasn't the frenetic energy of ambition, it was the steady, burning light of purpose. In the end, he agreed to consider it. It was a long shot, but it was a shot. That evening, he called Lee. I have a crazy idea, she began. It might not work, and it's a huge step down for me professionally, but tell me, he said. I'm thinking of relocating my universe a little closer to yours, she said, a smile in her voice. How do you feel about having an astrophysicist in the neighborhood? There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a choked, happy laugh. Eris, he breathed. Are you serious? It's not a done deal, she cautioned. I have to get the project approved, find a place to live, figure out a million details. For the first time, it feels like I'm looking at the right map. Months later, on a clear, cold night, the four of them stood on a beach in Port Blossom. A powerful new telescope, a gift from Eris to the family, was pointed at the winter sky. The university had approved her project. It had taken months of negotiation, but her passion and impeccable research plan had won them over. He had found a small house to rent just up the coast, with an office that looked out over the ocean. It was a different life. Quieter and slower, but infinitely richer. I had the old star atlas open on a blanket, its pages illuminated by a flashlight. There, she said, pointing up, the big dog and the little dog, Canis Major and Canis Minor. Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky, Finn added, adjusting the focus on the telescope. It's part of Canis Major. Do you want to see it, Mom? Eris knelt by the telescope, peering into the eyepiece at the brilliant, shimmering star. She could feel Leo's hand on her shoulder, a warm, steady pressure. She looked up from the eyepiece, not at the sky, but at the three faces illuminated by the flashlight's glow. Maya's, full of imaginative wonder. Finn's, alight with scientific curiosity, and Leo's, his eyes reflecting the starlight, and a love so deep it felt as infinite as the cosmos itself. This was her universe now, not a cold, distant collection of data points, but a warm, vibrant, and loving constellation of people. It's beautiful, she said, though she was no longer talking about the star. It's perfect. Leo squeezed her shoulder, his heart full. Had spent his life as a keeper of stories, and now he was living the best one he had ever known. They had charted a new map, one that wasn't in any atlas, ancient or modern. It was a map drawn with courage, hope, and the unwavering belief that the most profound discoveries are not made by looking out, but by looking at the person standing right beside you. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and pine, and the only sound was the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore and the quiet, happy murmur of their two worlds now perfectly, beautifully aligned.